In the 5th year of my relationship with Daniel, one of his friends secretly said to me, "Amelia, remember to wear makeup next Wednesday, dress beautifully." I immediately understood what he meant. That day would be our 5th anniversary, and I'd recently seen a receipt for a ring Daniel had purchased. So I thought, Daniel must be planning to propose to me. But before he could, his first love returned home, divorced. Chapter 01. That Wednesday, I dressed up beautifully, hair soft, lips tinted, eyes shimmering. Zoe looked at me and couldn't stop smiling. "Amelia, you look so gorgeous today." Then, pretending to check her phone, she added with a poor excuse, "My friend's place is ready now, we can go." I smiled lightly at my reflection in the mirror. Zoe probably didn't know. I'd already guessed Daniel was going to propose. Maybe she wanted me to look perfect on camera, to record the most beautiful version of me at the moment I said yes. She had borrowed a celebrity makeup artist from a friend, pretending it was just for a restaurant opening, and that she needed me to pose for a few promotional photos. I didn't expose her. I just smiled and played along, pretending not to know about their carefully planned surprise. On the way there, Zoe, trying to hide her excitement, said, "Hey, Amelia, did you know, when girls cry, wiping tears with your middle finger looks prettier on camera?" I laughed softly. Really, I'll remember that. Even though I had mentally prepared myself, I still froze for a moment when I stepped out of the car. A sea of blue hydrangeas stretched before me, gentle and endless, like the ocean under twilight. Tiny lights sparkled among the petals, like fallen stars scattered across the ground. At the end of the floral path stood Daniel, surrounded by all our friends. Some held cameras, others recorded with their phones, all smiling warmly, eyes glimmering with silent blessings. Zoe nudged me lightly from behind. "Go on, Amelia." And Daniel, he stood at the very center, holding a large bouquet of hydrangeas, his handsome face lit with a soft, tender smile. He began walking toward me slowly. Behind me, Zoe's teasing whisper carried through the laughter, "We're recording, Amelia, remember, wiping tears with your middle finger looks better." Everyone laughed. I looked at Daniel. Most girls cry when being proposed to, overwhelmed, touched, trembling. But I didn't cry. Because I'd loved him for so long that loving him had become as natural as breathing. How could I cry when everything I'd ever dreamed of was finally within reach? So I smiled. I smiled as Daniel approached step by step until he stood right before me. His eyes were bright, glimmering with laughter. Our friends cheered and whistled behind him. Then, under all that noise and warmth, Daniel slowly knelt down on one knee. He looked up at me, his smile widening as he reached into his pocket. "Amelia, you." The words were cut off by the sudden ringing of a phone. Mercury Records played softly. "How much longer until I can reach your heart? How much closer until we meet? So near yet so far." Daniel's smile froze. He looked at me, startled, then hurriedly stood up and walked aside to answer the call. Everyone else laughed it off. "Daniel, you're proposing. Who leaves their phone on? Who's calling at a time like this?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Only my face turned pale. That ringtone, I hadn't heard it in 5 years. It was Carolina's ringtone. Daniel's first love. Chapter 02. Daniel left me alone at the proposal venue. When he came back from that call, he hurried the bouquet of hydrangeas into my arms and, amid our friends' puzzled voices, offered a rushed explanation. "Amelia, something urgent came up. I'll tell you when I get back." Our friends looked at one another. I instinctively grabbed Daniel's hand. He didn't look back, just wrenched his hand free and left me with a hurried, anxious silhouette. Zoe stayed with me. She didn't know who had called Daniel. She only knew that after that one call, Daniel abandoned a whole crowd of friends and the girl he was about to propose to. He muttered an apology without a single explanation and rushed away. On the way home, Zoe tried to comfort me. "Maybe something urgent at work. You know how Daniel is, steady, reliable. If it weren't serious, he'd never leave you like that." I said nothing. Zoe didn't know, Daniel is indeed steady and reliable. But in all these years, only Carolina could shatter his composure and strip him of reason. Maybe I looked too pale because Zoe grew worried. She said, "Amelia, don't panic." I turned to her and said, "Zoe, it was Carolina. She's back." Zoe stared at me, puzzled. Carolina? Who's that? Of course Zoe didn't know. We'd first met Carolina back in college. Carolina was Daniel's first love. Before she appeared, everyone said Daniel and I were the most well-matched pair. We grew up together. As a child I trailed him everywhere, calling him Brother Daniel. From kindergarten through elementary, middle, and high school, we were never apart. Our parents and family friends often joked that I was Daniel's child bride. I would blush and lower my head, and Daniel never refuted it. Sometimes, smiling, he'd even tease me back and call me little wife. Back then we all believed that someday Daniel and I would end up together. Until college, when he met Carolina. Carolina was 2 years ahead of him in the same department and head of the student union's outdoor practice division. I don't know if it was love at first sight for Daniel. I first heard of her when Daniel, a freshman then, stood before me with shining eyes, holding a photo of Carolina cradling a cat and asked if I could paint it for him. The girl in the photo was exquisite, exactly Daniel's type, striking features, bold beauty. I stared at the photo, curled my fingers, forced a casual smile and asked, "Who is she?" Daniel, still boyish and handsome then, wore a confident, determined smile. "She's your future sister-in-law," he said. I hid my trembling hands behind my back and spent a week finishing that painting for him. Before he gifted it to Carolina, he grinned with high spirits and told me, "Thanks, little Amelia. When Carolina and I get together, dinner's on me." I could only manage a thin smile. Daniel and I had never been together. He'd never said he liked me. My jealousy and possessiveness had no legitimacy, only nameless, titleless bitterness. His pursuit of Carolina became campus lore. It made sense. Daniel, Carolina, and the refined professor she liked, who already had a wife, were all campus luminaries. For as long as Daniel chased Carolina, Carolina stood just as steadfastly behind that professor. The only difference came at graduation. Carolina finally stole him. The professor divorced his wife, married Carolina, and went abroad. Daniel, lovelorn and defeated, fell apart for a while. I stayed quietly at his side. It took a year after Carolina left for him to seem recovered, though he stayed single, until family introduced him to dates and blind meetings. He was uninterested. One day, after returning from a blind date, he looked at me and joked, "Amelia, why don't we just be together?" My heart trembled. "Okay," I said. And that's how we started. I thought he'd moved on and wanted a new life. My feelings for him had never been subtle. Though our beginning wasn't ideal, once we were together we fit easily. We were compatible. I was gentle, Daniel was steady and accommodating. We never fought. Daniel was a good boyfriend, responsible to a fault. Being both childhood sweetheart and girlfriend meant he indulged me in everything. In our first year together, traces of Carolina still lingered, songs from her posts on his playlist, his absent-mindedness on her birthday, gifts to me that always carried a hint of someone else's taste. By the second year, those traces had been completely replaced by mine. We listened to music I liked. He fought for tickets and took me to concerts. He remembered my cycle, my birthday, every anniversary. His gifts matched my colors and style. His food orders catered to my palate. Everyone said Daniel was a paragon boyfriend. I too believed he had forgotten Carolina, and slowly learned to love me. Until today, when one featherlight call from Carolina returned me to my original shape. Chapter 03. Zoe stayed with me for a while, but Daniel still hadn't come home when she left, worry written all over her face. I sat alone on the sofa, watching the video our friends had filmed of Daniel's proposal. The beginning showed clips of them decorating the venue, the blue hydrangeas Daniel had arranged himself, sleeves rolled up, placing them one by one. The friend behind the camera didn't care about perfect angles, so the whole screen was filled with Daniel's bright, confident face. He looked into the camera, smiling as he said, "Our Amelia loves blue and hydrangeas the most. She'll cry her eyes out when she sees this." Someone off camera laughed loudly. "You're awful, man. Why do you want to make her cry? Shouldn't you make her laugh?" Daniel chuckled. "You don't get it. I want her to be so touched she cries. That way, if she ever gets mad and kicks me to the couch, I'll just buy her hydrangeas again. She'll remember this moment and forgive me." Laughter filled the recording, a scene of warmth, noise, and shared happiness. I smiled faintly through the silence of my living room. The video wasn't long. Since the proposal hadn't reached the end, the progress bar ran out quickly. Soon, the scene switched to Zoe leading me out of the car. In the video, I truly looked beautiful. My eyes sparkled like starlight as I smiled at Daniel. He, too, was smiling as he walked toward me with the flowers, then knelt on one knee. But before taking out the ringtone cut in. The last shot showed Daniel rushing back to shove the bouquet into my arms, hurriedly saying, "Amelia, something came up. I'll explain when I get back." Then the camera shook, blurred, and stopped abruptly. That was the proposal I had waited 5 years for. It had a beautiful, romantic overture, but the melody broke just before its climax, ending in absurdity. I don't know how many times I replayed that video before Daniel finally returned. I stayed seated on the sofa when I heard the door open. Glancing at the clock on the wall, 1:20 a.m. His hair was messy, jacket slung over one arm, shirt unbuttoned at the top. His expression was distracted, thoughtful. He froze when he saw me. "Amelia, why aren't you asleep?" No explanation, no guilt, just an ordinary tone, as though tonight's half-finished proposal had been nothing but a dream I'd imagined. "Daniel," I asked quietly, "don't you have anything to say to me?" That seemed to remind him. His face changed, and he hurried over to kneel in front of me, taking my hands. "Amelia, I'm sorry. Today was my fault." I looked at him. Was it Carolina? Did she call just to catch up? He hesitated before replying. "No, she's divorced. She came back with her child. You know she left early and doesn't have friends here. She hasn't told her mother about the divorce, so she had no one else to call." His face looked sincere. "Amelia, don't overthink it. I was just helping her out, that's all." He sounded earnest, whether to convince me or himself, I couldn't tell. "I'm proposing to you, Amelia. The past is over. I only love you. Don't you believe me?" I stared at him, unsure what expression I should wear. But his words reminded me, he said he was proposing. Except, was that really a proposal? He hadn't said, "Will you marry me?" I hadn't said I do. Even the ring had been missing. So, no, it wasn't a proposal. Maybe he realized that too. He half knelt again, took out the ring and looked up at me. Under the crystal chandelier, the light caught his eyes, and in them I saw a reflection of myself. "Amelia," he asked, "will you marry me?" My gaze moved from the glittering ring to his face. He looked sincere. Then, as I hesitated, he added, "Carolina wants to thank me and invite me to dinner. You can come with me, will that make you feel better? We've been together 5 years, Amelia. Give me a chance. Don't sentence me to death over one phone call." He must have seen my hesitation because he took the ring and carefully slid it onto my finger. When it settled into place, he smiled and said, "Amelia, don't worry. I know my boundaries." Chapter 04. Carolina scheduled the dinner 3 days later. When Daniel and I arrived, she had already booked a private room. Maybe to show sincerity, she waited for us at the door the whole time. It was early autumn, still hot by day yet chilly at night, and the restaurant's AC was on. She was only wearing a thin shirt dress, arms wrapped around herself. As we walked up, she turned her head and sneezed. Daniel frowned and said, polite as to any ordinary friend, "It's cold out. You're dressed too lightly, go in and wait." I smiled and glanced at Carolina. She didn't look much different from how I remembered, though there was a clear tiredness on her face, likely from hard years abroad, concealed under foundation. She smiled at Daniel and me. "Don't. I already troubled you a few days ago to help me find an apartment. How was I supposed to know you were proposing then?" She turned to me, warm and courteous. "Long time no see, Amelia." I looked up at her, nodded and said evenly, "Long time no see." She went on, still smiling, "Sorry, I really didn't know Daniel was proposing to you." Then she gave Daniel a playful scold. "You too. Asking you to pick me up from the airport is nothing compared to a proposal. If you'd told me, I never would have let you come." She looked back at me, apologetic. "Sorry, Amelia. Tonight is both a thank you and an apology. You're not mad, are you?" Daniel glanced at me. I slipped my hand from the crook of his arm and said calmly, "Of course not. After all, your affair with the professor caused quite a stir back then. Having no friends at home and no one to call is understandable." Daniel frowned, probably thinking I hadn't given Carolina enough face. Carolina, though, remained composed, pushed open the door with a gracious please. I didn't stand on ceremony, stepped in first, then looked back. Whether out of gentlemanly instinct or something else, Daniel held the door and gestured for Carolina to enter ahead of him. When his hand braced the handle, it brushed hers. I saw his fingers tremble imperceptibly, though his face didn't change. He lowered his gaze to her hand, as if thinking something. I watched them and said nothing. For me, the meal had no taste. Soon a server came over with a lap blanket. Which lady requested this? Before either Carolina or I reacted, Daniel pointed across the table. For her. Carolina blinked. I didn't ask for one. I did, Daniel said evenly. I touched your hand just now, it was cold. She stared at him a beat before accepting the blanket and spreading it over her knees. You're still the same as before, she said with a strange smile. Daniel cut her off with a glance at me. Just lending a hand. Carolina swallowed the rest of her words, her eyes rimmed slightly red. I unrolled my sleeves to cover my chilled arms. If Daniel noticed the coolness of Carolina's hand, he didn't notice that his fiancée was sitting right under the AC vent. Dishes arrived one after another. I looked at the spread and kept quiet. Daniel and Carolina were both adept at diverting topics and smoothing edges. Even though our shared past made catching up inappropriate, they managed to act as if nothing had ever happened, as if we were old friends. I was the only one out of step. They chatted sporadically, and while Daniel responded blandly, he kept peeling shrimp and serving me dishes with meticulous care. Carolina suddenly smiled, a touch nostalgic, a meaning underneath. Sitting with you two today feels like being back in college. Except back then. Her expression dimmed. She poured herself red wine and drank in quick, thoughtful swallows. Daniel, who had to drive, didn't drink. He frowned. Go easy. She coughed slightly, lips stained a vivid red, eyes glittering with moisture. In a joking tone that barely hid her hurt, she said, but now everything has reversed. Back then, before Daniel and I were together, when he chased Carolina while she chased her professor, he would sometimes bring me along because 6 out of 10 times she refused to see him alone. Daniel would sit beside Carolina, pouring water, handing tissues, peeling shrimp, while I sat opposite and watched. Now Daniel poured water, handed tissues, peeled shrimp for me. And Carolina sat opposite and watched. Daniel laid his hand over mine, expression mild. The past is past. Carolina's gaze paused on the diamond ring on my left ring finger. She murmured an then looked away. I kept eating what Daniel placed in my bowl, as if I hadn't seen her look. For some reason I remembered what Daniel swore to me on proposal day. We've been together 5 years, Amelia. Give me a chance. Don't sentence me over a single phone call. What a joke. I truly couldn't condemn him for one call. Yet this dinner, meant to explain and reassure me, slowly pushed me to the cliff edge of a decision. What settled it came near the end of the meal. A ringtone cut through the air, Carolina's. She answered. From our distance, the voice on the other end was clear, a child sobbing loudly. Carolina shot to her feet, panic-stricken. Baby, what's wrong? A little boy, hiccuping, Mommy, hot water, be burned. Daniel stood at once. Come on, I'll drive you back. Carolina, flustered, nodded and hurried for the door. Daniel strode after her, then, as if remembering me, looked back and hesitated. Amelia. I set down my chopsticks, smiled up at him. Go. Only then did he relax, gave me a grateful smile and left with Carolina. I sat alone. The AC blew cold air over me. A server approached with the bill, tentative. Miss, would you like to settle now? I ate slowly, bite by bite, until the bowl was empty, then said yes. After paying, I sent Daniel a photo of the receipt with a terse message, 2,568 renminbi. I didn't say who should pay. Whether he or Carolina, what difference did it make? I gave a wry smile, stood and left. Chapter 05. Packing up my things took longer than I thought. Daniel and I had been together for 5 years, over 1,800 days of shared life, of breathing the same air, of quiet companionship. As adults, how many people do we ever share 5 intertwined years with? The video games we played together, the teddy bear he gave me, the flowers on the balcony. The matching bathrobes, slippers and mugs in the bathroom. Even the neatly folded couple outfits in our wardrobe. I took what I could. What I couldn't, I packed into boxes for the building's donation drive. By the time I finished, it was late. Daniel hadn't come home yet. I tidied up the house. It looked a little too empty after losing one person's presence. When I finally turned off Do Not Disturb on my phone, I saw 5 missed calls from him. I didn't call back. His last message on WeChat was a hospital photo. He'd written, "Amelia, Eric got scalded by boiling water. Carolina can't handle it alone. I'm helping her at the hospital. I'll be back soon." Scrolling up, I found the payment transfer, 3,000 yuan. For the 2568 bill I'd sent him. How generous. I let out a faint, blurry laugh and accepted the payment. Almost instantly, another message came, a relieved emoji. "You finally checked your messages. You scared me. I thought you were mad." I thought about replying, then didn't. Moments later, his call came through again. Relentless ringtone. I answered. His sigh of relief reached my ear, followed by a tentative, nervous voice. "You're not mad, right, Amelia? You didn't reply to my messages." His voice was low. I figured the hospital wasn't the place to talk, so I swallowed what I wanted to say and simply replied, calm and even, "I was packing. Didn't see my phone." "Good," he said, "we'll talk when I get back." I smiled faintly and hung up. Before leaving, I took one last look at the now spotless living room. The traces of our 5 years together had been erased cleanly. The apartment looked ready to welcome a new owner. I thought I'd feel sadder, but the sadness was manageable. Maybe I was just exhausted. In a way, I was relieved Daniel was still at the hospital with Carolina. If he'd been home, I might have broken down while packing. 5 years, even if it were a dog, you'd feel something when parting. But he wasn't there. And because of that, I was able to leave cleanly, without hesitation. I took off the ring he had placed on my finger only 3 days ago and set it on the entryway table, somewhere he couldn't miss it. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door and walked away with my suitcase without looking back. The next morning, half asleep, I got his call. He must have just come back from the hospital. I glanced at the screen, 7:35 a.m. Maybe Daniel could keep pretending Carolina was just an old friend, someone he was helping out. But I could no longer believe it. What kind of friend stays at a hospital all night until dawn? When I had appendicitis, Daniel only stayed until my surgery ended. He left before the anesthesia even wore off. "There's a nurse and your mom with you. You're still under anesthesia, and I can't do much. I'll go back to the office to handle some emails," he'd explained later. At the time, I'd accepted it. It made sense. I wasn't awake, he couldn't help. I let it go. But now, comparing only made it worse. So why bother? I took a breath and said quietly, "What is it?" There was a long pause before he spoke. His voice was hoarse from a sleepless night. I couldn't read his emotions, just the fatigue. Finally, he asked, "I just got home, Amelia. Why's the house empty?" I smiled. Breakups should be done with dignity. He finally had time, so I was willing to be patient and explain. "It's not empty, Daniel. The ring's on the entry table. You should see it." I paused, steadying my breath. The lump in my throat wasn't heartbreak, it was the quiet ache of ending something that once mattered. Liberation mixed with regret. Better to end it now than discover after marriage that he'd never loved me. "Daniel," I said softly, "let's break up." He stayed silent. For a moment, I thought he'd apologize, or try to win me back. Instead, his voice came, impatient and tired, laced with restrained irritation. "Amelia, I haven't slept all night. Can you not start this now? It's such a small thing, don't blow it out of proportion, okay?" That's a little kid. His whole hand was burned. Carolina was panicking and crying. She doesn't know how hospitals here work. I was just helping. It's been years since what happened with her. Why are you still so paranoid? I didn't sleep a minute. I just want to rest, and you're starting this. I listened quietly. By the time he finished venting, the last trace of regret in me had disappeared. I realized I didn't even know why I had loved him so long. Maybe it was the illusion of youth that had kept the image of him polished all these years. Only when Carolina returned did I finally see the real him. I said nothing. Then I heard something crash hard onto the floor, probably the ring. And his voice followed, sharp and cold. Fine, Amelia, if you want to make a scene, go ahead. I've already given you a way out. Don't come crawling back later. I suppose that counted as mutual agreement. Before he could say another word, I hung up. Chapter 06. My friends were the first to know we'd broken up. Zoe called to comfort me, asking whether this breakup was just a Cold War spat or the real thing. I said, "It's real, Zoe. Daniel and I are impossible in this lifetime." She sighed. From past experience, she never wades too deep into friends' relationships. Sensibly, she didn't pry, only asked, "Do you want me to come over and keep you company?" I paused. "No, Zoe. I'm fine." She probably thought I was forcing myself and wanted to be alone, so she didn't insist. She only said, a bit hesitant, "Shout if you need me. And before hanging up, don't be too sad, Amelia." I MM'd and ended the call. It's strange. Breaking up with a 5-year sweetheart. By rights I should be devastated. But I didn't feel the usual grief. I admit I was low, but it felt like normal withdrawal. I didn't cry, didn't wallow, didn't binge, didn't feel like drinking myself silly. I didn't even lose sleep. I went to work and came home as usual, chatted with colleagues as usual. Calm and ordinary, just like any other day. Daniel didn't contact me after that day either. I took it as the normal no contact after a breakup. I did see him a few times, on Carolina's Moments. She's using her old WeChat again since returning to China. Her latest posts all involved Daniel. One was at the hospital, Daniel's tall back as he held a little boy with bandaged hands. Carolina's caption, "After all these years, I'm still grateful, thank you for always being there." Another was in the place she's renting, probably arranged by Daniel. The photo showed Daniel reading a storybook to the boy, the child curled in his arms, like father and son. No caption, just an emoji. They looked like a family. Because Daniel's face was visible, lots of friends from college to now messaged me in shock, "Amelia, what's going on? Didn't that kid Daniel just propose to you?" Too many DMs. Some close friends I couldn't just ignore. I posted a moment's update, "Many roads diverge north and south, you go to Xiaoxiang, I to Qin." A veiled breakup announcement. After that, the chats mercifully quieted. Before closing WeChat, I noticed my avatar was still our couple pic. I swapped it for a profile of just me. A while later, Daniel liked that post. Still using our couple avatar, he posted a drinking story. A whiskey glass and a pack of cigarettes with the caption, "No one to keep me in check now." As if pitiful. When Carolina married and left the country, Daniel was at his lowest, booze wrecked his stomach, cigarettes his lungs. I'd ridden him hard for a long time to quit smoking and keep alcohol to a minimum. When people push drinks at business dinners, he'd sigh theatrically, can't, my girl runs a tight ship. If she smells booze on me, I'm not getting into bed tonight." Honestly, that post was pretty childish. He rarely acts like that. Maybe, in his mind, it was him softening and giving me a step down. I shut my phone and ignored it. We stayed silent. The next time I saw Daniel was when I went home for the long holiday. Before, we always went back together. This time, I went alone. As soon as I arrived, my mom sensed something was off. She glanced behind me and asked, "Why are you alone? Where's Daniel?" I tried to sound casual, "We broke up." I expected her to persuade me or be shocked. Instead, she looked past me, sighed and said, "Good." I was stunned. She shut the door. "What, you thought I approved of you too?" "Yes, you grew up together and know each other well, but..." She sighed again. "But I know his heart isn't with you, silly girl." Only then did my nose sting. She hugged me and sighed, "Good that it's over. The ladies at my work adore you. Been wanting to introduce their sons for ages. You were all about Daniel, so I kept quiet. Better this way. I'll introduce you to someone better." I wrapped my arms around her waist, breathing in the warm scent of home. Family love is the strongest armor. With it, you don't fear facing any hurt barehanded. The next day, I got a WeChat from Daniel. We'd had nearly 2 months of no contact. He still had our couple avatar. His message was brusque, "My mom asked you to come over for dinner." I saw it much later and replied with a "then, Did you not tell Auntie we've already broken up? That's the trouble with childhood sweethearts, too intertwined to cleanly vanish from each other's lives. Otherwise, I would have deleted Daniel ages ago. He didn't reply, and I didn't care. A little later, our doorbell rang. My mom opened it. I heard Daniel's voice, warm and polite. "Auntie, I'm here to see Amelia." I walked over in slippers. He stood at the door holding a huge bouquet of blue hydrangeas. My mom took them with a little exclamation and, courteous but distant, said, "You shouldn't have. At my age, these aren't quite right. Bring carnations next time, I like those." Daniel hesitated. I stood at the entryway, our eyes met past my mom. He stayed perfectly composed, as if nothing had happened between us. "Amelia, want to go for a walk?" I frowned slightly, unsure what was left to say. But since he wanted to talk, I suppose we hadn't finished last time. I nodded. "Wait a second, I'll change my shoes." Chapter 07. Daniel and I wandered aimlessly along the road. He was the one who'd asked me out for a walk, yet once we were outside, he didn't say a word. As we circled the neighborhood, the sky began to darken. I finally asked, "What do you want to say?" Daniel sighed, stopped walking, and turned his head slightly toward me. His eyes held a kind of earnest confusion as he said, "Amelia, I don't understand." I raised an eyebrow. "Don't understand what?" He hesitated, then met my eyes again, his expression tinged with perfectly measured sorrow. "I don't understand why you're so bothered by Carolina now. Why you returned the ring over something so small. You knew I chased Carolina back in college, and you never minded. Later, when she went abroad, you still agreed to be with me. But now that there's nothing between Carolina and me, I can't understand why you're reacting like this." I hadn't expected this to be the reason he wanted to talk. I let out a quiet sigh and looked straight at him. "Daniel, back then I didn't mind because I had no right to. I wasn't your girlfriend, you had every right to pursue whoever you liked. When Carolina left and I got together with you, it was because I loved you. You knew that, I'd loved you for years. And when the chance came, I wanted to try. At that time, I was asking for love. Now, the reason I mind Carolina is because I'm your girlfriend, your fiancé. I need loyalty and affection from my partner. But unfortunately, you can't give me that. So I'm cutting my losses early. And I don't think that decision was wrong." Daniel's gaze stayed locked on me, brows furrowed tightly as if he couldn't comprehend my words. He said softly, "I admit I lost my temper that night and shouldn't have impulsively agreed to the breakup. But Amelia, we've been together for 5 years. You're already part of me. No one could ever replace you. What I did for Carolina, honestly, it was just out of compassion." I stared at him quietly for a long moment before speaking. "Daniel, that night Carolina invited us to dinner while ordering, after all these years, you still remembered she's allergic to oysters." I paused, watching his puzzled expression. "But later, when you were so gentle and attentive, serving food to me in front of Carolina, you forgot that I'm allergic to shrimp. You peeled so many for me that I didn't even have the heart to embarrass you in public. It's never one single straw that breaks the camel's back." Leaving me alone at the proposal, wrapping a blanket around Carolina, abandoning me at the restaurant without hesitation. Forgetting my allergy while remembering hers, all the little moments in Carolina's posts, each one added up. I watched the color drain from Daniel's face, then smiled, calm and free. "So tell me, Daniel, do you still think I'm making a fuss? You wanted me to marry you, but what then? To spend a lifetime being left behind every time Carolina needed you too?" I shook my head and looked at him steadily. "I won't let myself end up like that, Daniel. We broke up, and that's final. I won't regret it, and I won't look back. The day you left me standing alone at our proposal was the day you lost me forever." He looked at me, lost and speechless. I waved my hand lightly, smiling just as I used to when we said goodbye as kids. "Goodbye, Daniel." Then I turned and walked away. We both knew that goodbye could mean we'd meet again, but the people we'd become would never be the same. He might still be him, but I was no longer the Amelia who had loved him since the first stirrings of youth. Even the longest crush has an expiration date. He had finally become part of my past. From 6 to 16, then 26, he had stretched across my life like a thread. But now, I was ready to walk forward, head high, stride steady, into a new life. One without him. Epilogue. The next time I saw Daniel was at the gate of an elementary school. The world is neither too big nor too small. I was accompanying my fiancé Santiago to pick up his little nephew from school when we happened to run into Daniel and Carolina, who were there to pick up Eric. Daniel froze when he saw me. His gaze lingered on my face, then moved to Santiago beside me, pausing for a brief second before his expression soured. It was Carolina who spoke first. She came over with a smile. "Oh, Amelia, it really is you." Her eyes drifted to Santiago, and though she already seemed to know, she still asked, "And this is?" I smiled politely. "My fiancé." Her lips curved into a perfect social smile. "Congratulations. Have you set a date yet?" I nodded slightly, calm and poised. "Next month." She blinked, then said again, "Congratulations." I returned the smile and gave a small nod. After that, silence fell, one of those polite, heavy silences filled with all the words that will never be spoken. Daniel stood beside her, quiet, his eyes flicking to my face then down then back up again. I slipped my arm through Santiago's, pretending not to notice. The awkward stillness ended when a whirlwind of energy burst through the school gate. Santiago's little nephew came running and wrapped himself around his uncle's leg, shouting loudly, "Uncle." Then he turned to me, grinning wide. "Auntie." Santiago bent down to pick him up, laughing. "You sweet talker, what do you want, a transformer or KFC? You can only pick one." The little boy squirmed in his arms, chubby hands reaching toward me. "I want Auntie to carry me. Uncle buys me the transformer and Auntie takes me to KFC." Santiago and I both burst out laughing. He patted the boy's head affectionately. "Greedy little monster." We walked away, still laughing. Only after we'd gone a long way did I realize I hadn't even said goodbye to Daniel and Carolina. I turned back. Daniel was still standing there, looking in our direction. He must not have expected me to look back. Our eyes met suddenly. I hesitated for a second, then smiled politely. He stiffened, turned away, pretending not to see. Santiago reached over, took my hand in his, saying nothing as he kept soothing the little boy in his arms. I smiled and squeezed his hand back firmly. Later, I heard news of Daniel and Carolina again, from a casual conversation with my mother. After our breakup, Carolina had followed Daniel home once. But his parents still disliked her, refusing to let her near. Even though Daniel took care of her out of old habit, it seemed he never really intended to rekindle anything. After Santiago and I got engaged, Daniel apparently started dating someone new. That new girlfriend, however, wasn't the forgiving type. When Carolina called Daniel again one day, the woman snatched the phone and scolded her for over half an hour straight, even printed out Carolina's chat messages with Daniel and plastered them all over her workplace. Then she stood outside with a loudspeaker, shouting that Carolina was seducing another woman's man. Carolina cried hysterically and probably went to Daniel, but beyond that, I don't know. Men and women, their chaos, their heartbreaks, some give, some take. As for me, life went smoothly and happily, and that made it easier to forgive everything that came before. When I later ran into Daniel's mother, she only sighed and said over and over, "What a sin. What a pity." Daniel, it seemed, had grown tired of it all too. Rumor had it he'd broken up with the new girlfriend as well. I thought, after all that circling, maybe he and Carolina would end up together after all. But the last time I heard of Carolina, it was through her Moments post, a screenshot of 58 unanswered calls with a melancholy caption. "The only thing constant in the world is that people always change." I don't know why, but it made me remember Daniel's old special ringtone for her. "How far must I go to reach your heart? How long until I get close to you? That person who's near yet out of reach is still waiting to meet you." Daniel had orbited around Carolina like a planet circling its sun, trapped between love and gravitational inertia. But in the end, even that orbit broke away. Whether he ever truly loved Carolina, perhaps even he never knew. Just like that couple's avatar, he never changed. But all of that has nothing to do with me anymore.